my mouth and the meditation of my heart be to the greater honor and glory of God. Amen. So there's a common theme that runs through this letter to the Hebrews and also in the gospel, and it has to do with hospitality. Hospitality that has to do with meals and food, and also hospitality in dealing with social status and cultural differences in status. And so I thought that these readings and these themes lead to some anecdotal kind of stories. And this one kind of has to do with where is your personality? So I oftentimes find myself at these clergy conferences or church conferences, like I went to a couple weeks ago over in Illinois, and had a couple meals with folks there. So you're in this situation, and most of the time you're going to find yourself, you're going to situate yourself in the middle of the pack to where you're going to get your food, and then you're going to go sit down, and you're going to find a table where there's an open seat, and you're just going to go sit down, socialize, and so on. But maybe people are being reluctant about going first, and so you go up and you get your food, and so you're the first one to sit down at the table. And then you're having this assumption that everybody else is going to come and fill in the seats around you. The second would be that, so you're in the middle of the pack and you go and you get your food, and then you look around though and you see that all of these tables are filled and you have to start a new table. Again, the assumption is that people are going to go fill around you. But what happens, and then you have to kind of make the decision, okay, so what happens if people don't fill around the table? Am I comfortable enough in my own skin to sit there and eat by myself? Of course, a lot of times, you know, if we have our cell phones and we have cell phone service, we just entertain ourselves with being on the phone, and then, you know, we act like we're so busy and important with what's on our phone. So that's kind of, you think about when you've been in that kind of situation. Also, Jesus brings up in this parable about a wedding reception or wedding banquet. And I remember I had been asked to perform a wedding for somebody here at St. John's, and it was somebody that I didn't know, but they invited me to the reception in such a way that I felt like I was almost obligated to have to go. So I did, and I get there, and there's no place necessarily designated seating for me, and I didn't expect to be sitting up, you know, with the bridal party and so on. But it was kind of just a weird situation to kind of figure out where I'm going to be sitting in the midst of this reception. Then being seated next to someone, then the next scenario is you're someplace and you know a bunch of people around you, and it's seating, you know, reserved seating in a sense. And lo and behold, you're seated next to somebody that you don't really like very well. So then it's kind of, oh, how do I deal with that? How do I deal with that situation? Can I be cordial at least through this meal? Or do you eat really fast and find a way to get out? Another story that kind of came to mind as I thought about this was back when I was back in Shelbyville at St. Luke's Episcopal Church. Once a month, we would cook a dinner for the Salvation Army. We would take the dinner to the Salvation Army, and it was like a soup kitchen situation, and the poor would come, and so I would try to figure out, not that I try to find the scraggliest looking person and then sit down with them and try to get to know them. And sometimes they would just be kind of like, leave me alone, I just want to eat, you know. But other times times this scraggly person would have some of the most interesting stories in history to kind of find out, what led them to this kind of life. And it may be that, they started out in a nice family, but life just dealt them, so many bad things happened that they just found themselves in this rough situation. So now let me talk about this. I got to thinking about the image and the scene of this, what's taking place at Luke and what Jesus is saying. That it's you get all these people and they all feel like they're high status kind of people. And so they're practically stumbling over playing musical chairs to get the best seats at the table. But Jesus kind of scolds them for that and says, you're going to get kicked down to the kiddie table and you're not going to like it very well. So why don't you start out at the kiddie table, and then if you get invited to the big people's table, then that's fine. In my experience, I've often found that it's more entertaining to be at the kiddie table than it is at the adult table when it comes to conversation. And at least if you're sitting at the kiddie table that the eating etiquette is out the window. So if you want to blow bubbles with your straw, you go right ahead. Important people at the meal assumed that they had the best seat. And then in this in the letter to the Hebrews, we have this famous saying, that show hospitality, radical hospitality, even to the most poorest person or somebody who looks poor, because you might be entertaining angels unaware. But on the flip side of that is accepting hospitality from others, even if it's somebody that's maybe giving you their last dollar or giving you their last meal. I remember if you remember I think it's Elijah in the book of Kings, that God tells him he's trying to escape from King Rahab, who's wanting to kill him, and he says, well, go to this city, and I'll protect you there. And he goes, and this woman is drawing water, and Elijah says, I'm going to stay with you. And the woman says, well, that's fine, but I'm getting this little bit of water. I've got a little jug of oil and a little bit of flour, and this is the last that I have. And then so I'm going to bake this little cake for my son. We're going to eat it, and then we're going to starve to death, and we're going to die. And so she goes. Elijah follows her to her house, and she goes in. And as long as Elijah's there, the oil never runs out, and the flour never runs out. So by her showing, she could have said, "No, I don't want you coming to my house," and then she would bake the cake and die. But because she didn't realize it, but she had God's prophet there that she was entertaining. Lydia has always told me as a pastor that when you go to visit somebody, whatever they give you, now I draw the line at beef, but whatever they serve you, go ahead and eat it. And so I'm not going to say somebody's name, but you may figure it out. It's one of our members that she had cats, and she would always offer me cookies and iced tea. And the cookies always smelled and tasted like cats. But I remembered Lydia's words. She said, whatever you get served, you need to eat it. So I ate those cookies very slowly and watered those suckers down with as much iced tea as I could.
I couldn't do it.
This was somebody whose eyesight wasn't all that great either. But anyway, when I was 12 years old, another anecdotal story that kind of fits with this. My brother he's 8 years older than me, and he had mowed grass for this little old lady who lived practically in a shack on the outskirts of our little town. And he mowed grass for a number of years. And then when I turned 12 years old and it was time for me to mow grass, then I got to mow grass for him. And I got $2 to mow her grass. And this was like in 1972 or 74 or something like that I started. And I remember at one point the gas prices started to go up, and I went to her and said, you know, I just would really like to have a little more money because now gas has gone from 35 cents to 50 cents a gallon, and it's just getting harder and harder. And then she would have me in the springtime. She had a little garden. She'd have me spade up her garden and do some other, you know, picking up limbs and stuff. And so whenever I would do extra, she would invite me in for lunch. And that woman was an amazing cook. She could take what little she had and turn it into a gourmet meal. And also, I thank her for, I haven't had it in a while, but she introduced me to hominy. And I actually like hominy. So Pearl Connolly was her name, and I still just love that woman to death. All of this really fits into our baptismal covenant, that in our baptismal covenant we are told to seek and serve Christ in all persons, and love your neighbor as yourself, and respect the dignity of every human being. That what we're told and what Jesus is trying to tell us is to see the divine spark in everybody. Even the most scruffiest person, or, you know, the person with the fancy suit, because, you know, even Bill in his fancy white suit is not perfect. But and Jesus is saying, you know, that exalt the humble, lift them up, lift up their self-worth and their dignity. But at the same time, God, in his wisdom, is able to humble the exalted. There will be a judgment day for that. Be imitators of Jesus Christ, both individually and in your life. But this is also a message for the church ourselves, that how do we treat people when they walk into the door of this church? Do we treat them like they are Christ that is coming to visit us? Or do we treat them as if they don't have any self-worth? And I told this story before, that the first Episcopal church that Lydia and I walked into after we were married, 3 Sundays in a row, they did not greet us, they did not invite us to coffee hour, and we thought, wow, those Episcopalians are just cold, you know, and friendly. And so we were going to go to a Lutheran church, but then decided to try an Episcopal church a little farther out of town in Indianapolis. And they were just, well, just grabbed their arms around us and welcomed us and just made us a part of their family. And that's partly why I'm standing here today as an Episcopal priest and not somewhere off in a Lutheran church. So what are we told in the Gospel of Luke, or that's the Gospel of Matthew? When was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you? When was it that we saw you naked and gave you clothes? When was it that we saw you sick or poor in spirit and we lifted you up and healed you? When was it that you were in prison or captive to the world and we helped to free you? Truly I tell you, when you helped the least among you, you did it to me. The kingdom of heaven and the church of Jesus Christ, it thrives on hospitality, on this radical hospitality, and the building of relationships with every child of God. Amen.
Amen.